Okay, so in hospitals and clinics, pretty much everywhere, there's this one product that's become a huge go-to for really tough wounds: silver dressings. I mean, they're used all the time. But are they really a modern medical marvel? Or are we just throwing a lot of money at a high-tech version of an old folk remedy?
To put it another way, are these dressings the miracle cure they sometimes seem to be, or are we just leaning on a really expensive, overused crutch? That's the big question we're going to tackle today. So let's dive in.
You know, to really understand modern silver dressings, we actually have to go way, way back. Because using silver to fight off germs is anything that new. Its reputation as a powerful antimicrobial, well, it stretches back for thousands of years. This timeline tells such a cool story, right? I mean, think about it. The exact same element that ancient Greeks and Romans used to keep their water from going bad eventually became silver nitrate to protect a newborn's eyes in the 1800s. Then came that famous silver sulfadiazine cream for burns back in the 60s. And now, here we are with these super advanced foams and fibers. It's literally an ancient remedy that's been wrapped up in a very modern high-tech package.
So, how does this ancient metal actually work when it's inside a modern dressing? Well, the magic isn't really in the solid silver itself. It's all about what the silver unleashes when it gets down to business in a wound. Let's break down the science. The real hero of the story is something called the silver ion. That's Ag+. As soon as a silver dressing gets moist from wound fluid, it starts releasing these tiny, positively charged particles. And these ions are the actual germ-killing agents. They're the secret weapon that makes the whole thing work. And let me tell you, these ions are absolutely ruthless. They launch this devastating three-pronged attack. First, they just breach the bacterial cell wall, basically poking holes in it until it bursts. Second, they get inside and cut the power, shutting down the cell's energy production by messing with its enzymes. And finally, they scramble the bacteria's DNA, so there's no way it can replicate. It's just a complete, systematic takedown of the germ. And this is exactly why silver is so popular. It is not a picky fighter. It's what we call a broad-spectrum weapon. It takes out a huge range of bacteria, and that includes the really nasty antibiotic-resistant superbugs like MRSA. Plus, it can handle many types of fungi and even some viruses. So, with that kind of raw, destructive power, you'd think the case would be closed, right? Silver's amazing, end of story. But this is where things get complicated. The clinical evidence has been a total roller coaster, with years of conflicting studies that have left doctors and nurses debating. For a long, long time, the big evidence reviews were really cautious. They basically said, look, most of these studies are too small or they're flawed. There just isn't enough solid proof to say we should use these all the time. But just recently, massive new analyses have started to shift that story, finding real measurable benefits. But here's the catch: only in specific situations. So let's look at the report card. For diabetic foot ulcers, the evidence is now strongly positive. It really helps. For burns, yeah, the modern silver dressings are a clear winner over the old school creams. But then you get to venous leg ulcers, and it's a mixed bag. Maybe some short-term help, but no clear long-term win. And for pressure injuries, the data is still pretty limited. So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution. Okay, let's just zero in on the single strongest piece of good news. A huge 2024 analysis found that if you have a diabetic foot ulcer, using a silver dressing makes it more than twice as likely to heal compared to a standard one. That's a massive difference. We're not talking theory here. This is a clear, measurable benefit. But then, on the flip side, that very same major analysis took a hard look at venous leg ulcers and found nothing. No significant long-term healing benefit. And this quote really says it all. It just hammers home the point that what works wonders for one kind of wound might do very little for another. So, how on earth do we make sense of all this conflicting evidence? Well, the answer from the experts is to stop thinking about silver as just a routine default dressing and start treating it more like a targeted medication with really clear rules for how and when to use it. This whole idea is called antimicrobial stewardship. Silver stewardship is really just about being smart. It means using these powerful and, let's be honest, expensive dressings only when they're truly needed. The goal is simple: get the best possible results for patients while minimizing all the downsides, like side effects, high costs, and the very real danger of creating silver-resistant superbugs.
So how do you actually do this? Well, one of the key strategies that international experts recommend is called the 2-week challenge. It's simple. You start a silver dressing on a wound that looks infected or is at high risk. Then, and this is the important part, you commit to checking it again in 2 weeks. If there are clear signs of improvement, fantastic. Keep going. But if not, you stop the silver and you rethink your entire approach. It's a really simple, powerful rule to make sure we're using silver intelligently. So let's boil all this down. What does this actually mean in practice? Let's break it into a really clear, practical framework for when silver should be used, and maybe more importantly, when it should not be used. Let's think of it like a stoplight. You've got a green light to consider silver for wounds that have clear signs of infection, or for those high-risk diabetic foot ulcers we talked about. It's also a great tool for heavily draining wounds that could easily get infected, or to use right after a wound has been professionally cleaned out to keep the germ count low. And here's the hard stop, the red light. You want to avoid silver on clean, healthy wounds that are healing up nicely on their own. Using it just in case isn't supported by the evidence, and frankly, it's a waste of resources. In fact, because silver can be a little bit toxic to our own healthy healing cells, putting it on a clean wound might even slow things down. And of course, never, ever use it long-term without doing that crucial 2-week check-in. So if there is just one thing you remember from all of this, let it be this. Silver's job is to kill microbes. That's it. It is not some kind of universal healing agent or a magic potion. Its role is to get an infection under control so that the body's own amazing healing processes can finally take over. It's a critical tool, for sure, but it is just one tool in the toolbox. And that leads us to a final, really critical question. We already know that bacteria are getting smarter and developing resistance to silver, just like they do with antibiotics. So if we overuse this powerful tool and it starts to lose its punch, what's going to be our next weapon in the fight to protect our most vulnerable wounds?